We're interviewing Saul Silver, September 14th, 1998. This is tape number 3. So talk about how difficult it was to learn a new language at that point.
It really wasn't difficult for me because I had no choice. I had to speak it, They wouldn't, they just spoke to me English right from the very first day, whether I liked it or not. If I had any problem, they would help me with German, which I wasn't very fluent in it either. So between I arrived there in June, between June and around December, I was pretty fluent in English. As a matter of fact. But her husband was very strict. He was a psychiatrist, provincial psychiatrist at that time. They too escaped from Germany just before the Nazis took over. They just in time, otherwise they would have been killed there. And I remember when the very first day I arrived there, he called me in. He had there was a big living room. He was a tall man, and he sat down. He just looked at me, and he asked me to tell him a little bit about my life. And he just, he says, das Leben, remember, Saul, das Leben geht weiter. Life has to go on, he says. You are here, and I expect you, he says, to do well in school. That was so. I hardly knew any English. I entered grade 9. And my first report I started in September. In January I got my first. It was first report and second. And it wasn't so good, let's face it. I had difficulty. He got the report, he calls me in. He says, Saul, I'm not too happy with your report. You'll have to do better than that. His daughter was always excelling in school. She had 2 masters. She was on scholarship. She had 2 masters. She has a master's in arts and master's in physics. They live in Washington. Her husband was he was a director of the research, and I forgot the name of it, in Maryland, whatever. They have 2 daughters. One son is professor at one of the big universities. One daughter is a lawyer. The other one is a doctor. So you see the kind of. So anyhow, I tried real hard, and in June, I brought all A's. I came in first in class. Oh, this he liked. He liked that, and he was very happy. But then we decided it was, probably better. Originally, really, what they had in mind is, I think, of adopting somebody. But I was already a little too old for that, and the fact is that I had a mother. You see, when I left, I think I left the only way I could get to Canada is as an orphan. So I claimed to be an orphan, that I had no mother. There was only one way of getting either to the United States or to Canada. And then I told them the truth, I have a mother. But regardless of that, we remained very good friends, like I say. They never felt sorry for bringing me, and I never felt sorry for being with them. We still keep in touch, and we call every so often, and I send her. She's still alive, Mrs. Fisher. She's 93 now. She's in a home in Washington, and I call her almost weekly, and then she remembers me. Oh, Saul, she says, it's so wonderful to hear from you. So wonderful to hear from you, and she loves they love our kids, and we love them. It was a wonderful relationship. I think it kind of affected my whole life, my outlook on life, the way I raised my family. They exposed me to a world that I never knew. that I never knew that existed, and I probably wouldn't have found out about it if it hadn't been through them.
When you came to Canada, started a new life there, were you able to discuss what had happened to you, your experiences in the war with anyone there in Canada? Do you remember having any kind of discussions
Well,
about that?
I discussed it with them. They used to ask me details and so on. But it was, I would discuss it with anybody that would ask me anything about my past and so on. But there were never any formal interviews or anything like that regarding it. Nobody ever really sat down and wanted to record it or anything like this. But people that were interested, certainly I was happy to tell them what I went through.
Did you have a feeling that people knew what went on, or did you think...
No, because even myself, when I think back, I don't believe that anything like this was possible. Sometimes it seems like a nightmare. Wait a minute, that couldn't be. But the fact is, it is. There, my sister was killed. It's a fact. This happened and that happened, and it's something you can't conceive that something like this, that one people would do it to another people, just simply because they were a Jew. That's all.
When you went to Canada, were you able to sleep all right? Did you have nightmares about what happened?
Oh, I'm sure I had nightmares. Yeah. I still have nightmares. Occasionally. I get it. I relive it, and it happens. Many times I find myself running away, screaming, and yelling, Don. My wife, I feel they're trying to get me, and I say, Don, don't kill me, and so on and so on. It happens quite often.
Still today?
Yeah. We both have it. She especially, she wakes up, screams, scared, and so on.
When did you meet back up with her?
Well, I knew my wife's family before. I didn't know them personally. I knew they lived there because they had the biggest building in our town, and they had the only electric bell in our town. But I met her in Montreal. She went to Toronto, and then from Toronto she came to Montreal, and I met her there. And she was very unstable, I lived through a lot. She lived through a lot worse than I did, because at least I had a mother, I had a sister that I had to look up to. She had nobody. She had some few cousins that did not know how to treat her, how to handle a person that went through such hell. So they in a way, they were kind of abusive to her instead of helping her. So I met her there, and we became friends, and I started helping her because she needed a lot of help. She needed somebody to talk to. She would cry a lot. She was very insecure. She was very sensitive to. She couldn't even when she stayed in the same home that I did, a temporary home, and they used to make fun. They used to pour water in the bed and so on. Kids, I took it. She couldn't take a lot of that stuff, that they did. She always thought they were picking on her and so on. So for her, it was extremely difficult. And I kept on helping her. And eventually, you keep on helping a person, and you get so attached and doing this for her and doing that for her, that eventually the best way to help each other is to get married. But I wasn't really ready. I was too young for it. I didn't make a living, and it was difficult. And the adjustments were very difficult in the beginning between the two of them. I couldn't. Neither she or I could handle Mary. She would cry at everything. She would become hysterical, and I didn't know how to handle it. I was too young for it. But we learned through trial, bad and worse, through trial. Slowly we made adjustments. But like I say, the fact that I was with these people, I had much better background to face life than she had. And slowly we fought together. We fought and we kissed and we did. And she had a social worker. Occasionally I would have to call a social worker for help. I didn't know how to handle, and so on. There were times, very bad that we were falling apart, I didn't know how to cope with it. But like I say, slowly we learned. And we are still having difficulties. Eventually children came and they grow up and now they're having difficulties. Their problems are becoming our problems. And but when we look back and when I remember a time when my greatest wish was, I said, oh my gosh, if I ever survive this, I'm going to eat as much white bread as I can. Now, who knew that white bread was bad for you? We had black bread. Who knew that black bread was really the good thing that we were eating? But oh my gosh, I'll just get out of this, and I'll get a few white breads, and I'll eat and eat and eat, because I haven't seen a piece of white bread for so long. Now I'm finding out, wait a minute, white bread is no good for you. So when I look back to all that and I see the problems we have now, I knock myself in the head and I say, wait a minute, this is all minor. It is meaningless. At one time, life, you were fighting I was fighting for my life. All I wanted was to survive. And now, a minor thing like this, we get upset if the stock market goes down, or we get upset if something else happens and so on, which really you had to live through this hell to appreciate what you have now. To appreciate what you have now, when you realize how valuable life is and how valuable freedom is when you lose it and when you gain it back, when you can walk on the street and not to be called dirty Jew, when you don't have to wear that armband with the star, and it's really a gift that we don't appreciate it until we lose it. We don't appreciate life and freedom until before we lose freedom. So I think everything else, all these things are meaningless compared, unless you have that freedom and be able to do whatever you want without fear.
When did you have children?
Well, let's say Rita was born, now you put me on Rita was born, let's say we were married in 1952, so Rita was born 1957. Well, she'd be proud of me because I never remember the dates, and Bonnie was born 1958, a year and a half apart.
In Canada? In
Canada, yes. They were born one at a time, yes.
And when did you move to the United States?
I came in January of 1958, and Lucia came in 1959, a few months later. We had a very difficult. We had nothing. We started off. We had to borrow some furniture. I had no car. My first car I bought was I paid $75. The windshield wipers didn't work. Whenever it was raining downtown, I had to leave the car and take the bus. But that's all. But that's how we started. We started off slowly. I worked hard. I worked 7 days a week. I worked 12 hours a day. I never had a business of my own. I worked for a company. I worked long hours, long days.
What did you do?
Lithographing. I used to operate printing presses. Yes, I learned that trade in Canada because I did go for a year to a school of graphic arts in Canada. And slowly, we started off at nothing. We just Nusha came out here to Canada, and together with my sister and brother-in-law, they bought in Monterey Park a duplex together. That was for the money. When she went to, she worked for about 3 years, but instead of doing any, every check she bought Canadian bonds. So she had about $3,000 in Canadian bonds. She didn't spend a penny of her money. Only we lived off whatever I was making. And then when she went to Canada here for a visit, together they bought a duplex. So she had that money for a down payment. This is how we started off. And eventually my brother-in-law moved to West Los Angeles. He sold out his half to us. And eventually we tore down the garage and built a house in the back for ourselves and used the duplex as a rental. But it was all slowly, and so on. And,
how do you think your wartime experience as a child affected the way you lived the rest of your life?
Well, like I mentioned before, there are times, things bother me, but every time I think back what I lived through, I realize how foolish it is to worry about all these things, considering what at one time I could barely survive. So in a way it does help me. I think it makes a stronger person out of me. It gives me, every time things are bad, I have that cushion that I can lean on something. I can lean on that past and say, hey, wait a minute. At one time, you only wanted, you wished you had white bread. So why are you worrying about that? Now it's foolish even to worry about these things. I think it did help me, made a stronger person out of me.
How has it affected the way you raised your family?
Well, maybe there were times maybe I was a little bit impatient. Maybe I raised my voice occasionally where I didn't have to. But when I talked to the girls grew up normal children. They did well for themselves. Rita is a successful CPA. She's controller of company. Bonnie is a strong person. So apparently my past did not affect them negatively too much. And Rita is very proud to talk about it. As a matter of fact, she made once a report in school about our life and so on, what happened to us and so on. And
how has it affected your faith, your
my
religious
faith? Well, I was too young to be too religious, to get involved in too much. At one time, after the war, I had no faith. I got involved with leftist movements. I belonged to a kibbutz that had leftist leanings, that did not believe too much in God. I felt that if there is a God, He should not have allowed what happened. My mother, who came from a religious family, even became the same way many times. She would say, oh, wait a minute, come on, what kind of a God are you talking about? A God that allowed children to be killed, children to be picked up by their legs and their heads smashed, and God looks on something when they didn't even sin yet, they didn't even understand why they were killed. So yes, it did. But eventually, I came to terms. I realized that God, if there is such a thing as God, He isn't there to really help us. We have to help ourselves. I think it's believing, it's the faith, it's something to hold on to when you're in need. I remember I met Russian office communists. Oh, they didn't believe in God. And suddenly, when something went wrong, he would say, oh, Boże, oh God. So we would laugh at him. What do you mean you say God? You don't believe in God. He says, well, when I have problems, I always mention God. It can't hurt. It's a security blanket. So I still, I'm more now. I have more faith now. I became involved in the temple, and as a matter of fact, when we had no rabbi, I used to do the services in our temple, because I have a pretty good voice, and I learned it. And I used to do the cantorial services and with the rabbis for a while until we had a rabbi and so on. Not so much that I believed that much in it, but I enjoy doing it. You feel good about it. I think faith is something. If you feel good about it, that's enough. That should be sufficient enough. And if you do the right things, you love your neighbor, you know, and treat people properly, eventually you get rewarded for it. Whether it is from God, you get it rewarded from other people. But
are there any other experiences that we haven't touched on that you wanted to bring up?
Experiences during the war. Now, I told you about my sister. I told you about that. I had just one time, that wouldn't be really, I was almost caught and so on. But there were so many instances where I came that close to death, so many times that they would run after me and I would run away and so on, that it would be too much even to remember and so on.
Did you know your grandparents?
Very well. I lived with them. They were wonderful grandparents. Did you?
We'll show when we're done. We'll
yeah, you're done. Yes, yes. I lived with my grandparents when I was in really sticky. When I was going to school, grade 1. I lived with them. Yeah, very warm people, like all grandparents those days were. I don't know. I don't know any grandparents that were bad to their grandkids.
Is that on your mother's side or father's side?
It's my mother's side. Yes, my mother's side. Yes.
And what happened to them?
Oh yeah, that would be a story. Yeah, that happened before. That happened in 1942. That was before that Thursday action. That was another action. They just came in, they surrounded, and they caught. And they took a lot. That was the very first action that they had. They caught a lot of people, and they caught my grandmother. They took my grandmother, my grandfather, and my uncle, the uncle that survived with us in the hiding I mentioned to you. They took his wife and the little boy. The boy must have been 5 years old. They took them on the first transport to Belzec. The Belzec was one of the first concentration camps. Belzec was first where they were just experimenting how to kill people efficiently. They were still using in Belzec trucks with where they would pump the trucks with diesel exhaust. They would put the people in the truck, reverse the exhaust, the hose into the truck, and that's how they were killed. They were experimenting what the most efficient way, but they realized that wasn't efficient, filling up a truck with people and killing them this way with exhaust. That's where they made soap out of them. I saw the soap after the war. I was told this is from the people in Belzec. It was kind of a stone, almost gray stone soap that they were actually making. Belzec was the first experimental death camp in Poland. Later on, the other camps became a lot more efficient when they learned from there.
When did you find out what had happened to your grandparents?
Well, I don't know how we knew, but we knew they went to Belzec. We knew already that what was going on in Belzec that they killed. So they took, like I said, the parents and the child and that. There was also once, but not our family was affected. There was one special action where they came in and they took children only. Why children only, I have no idea. I wouldn't be surprised. It was for experimental purposes. They took no adults that day. It was on a Sunday. Because I was with my father in the fields and we heard about it. We didn't come back. They took children only. I don't remember whether it is girls also or boys only for some reason. Because we have some friends in LA whose little brother was taken that day. It was on a Sunday. For what purpose, I have no, but I wouldn't be surprised. It was, I don't know, I don't think that German families would have adopted Jewish kids, but it was probably for experimental reasons that they took the kids only. That was another one of those sections.
Is there anything you'd like to close with? Any kind of message that you have?
Well, I was going to say, I may as well. I wish to take this opportunity to thank Steven Spielberg and the Shoah Foundation for giving me this opportunity to contribute to the gathering of testimony of the Holocaust survivors. It is almost inconceivable that in the 20th century, Germany, one of the most civilized nations in the world, would embark on a systematic plan to eradicate another people for the only reason that they were Jews. And they almost succeeded. It is my fervent hope and prayer that the preservation and gathering of this information should help future generations become more tolerant towards each other and prevent similar Holocausts ever to happen again. I want to thank you, Mr. Levy, for all your patience, and you, Peter, and for having me here. God bless you.
Thank you. All right.
All right, this is my grandmother. Her name was Dietl Einhorn. She was born in Poland, and she died in Belzec, and she in 1942. She was a very strong person. She had 7 children. There's still a daughter surviving Argentina, one daughter surviving Argentina. She was a wonderful grandmother, and I have wonderful memories I had with her. This is my older sister, Yetka. She was born in 1926 in Poland. She was 16 years old when she was killed with her boyfriend in 1942. She was a very talented and bright girl, good scholar, and I miss her a great deal.
Where was this taken?
This picture was taken in Zaliszczyki when she was performing. She is here in an outfit that she was performing on the stage. It could have been in 1938, no, 37, the Russians came 39, probably around 1937.
Okay.
This is my wonderful mother, Zonia Zilberschein. Her maiden name used to be Zonia Einhorn. She was born, I think, in 1898 in Poland. She was a wonderful mother to us. And fortunately, they did survive with me through all those dark days. Eventually we immigrated to Canada and then to the United States. She passed away in 1990 at the age of 93.
This picture was taken.
This picture was taken probably in maybe in 1990 or something like that. No, couldn't be 1990 when she passed away. 1985 or something like 82.
In Los Angeles?
In Los Angeles, yes.
Okay.
Well, as you can all see, this is my wedding picture. That hat looks like it's too big on me a little bit. And I was about 21. Nusha 18. We were still kids ourselves. I know before going to the hoop I was sitting reading the comics, Little Abner. The whole thing seemed so funny to me, but somehow we made it.
And your wife's full name at that time?
My wife's name was Nusha Hessing,